Dillon Gabriel was supposed to start. But when a sudden injury sidelined him, Shedeur Sanders found himself stepping into one of the NFL's most pressure-filled moments against the Ravens mid-game without a single first-team rep. The result was a raw, exposed debut that left Sanders emotionally drained, yet unwavering in his post-game press conference. With no chemistry with the starters and no preparation, he didn't lash out. Instead, he pointed straight at a system that failed to support its backups and acknowledged the reality of his performance. This wasn't a quarterback making excuses. It was a player dissecting the deeper cracks in an organization.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
What made Sanders' remarks hit harder wasn't just his candor. It was a clarity with which he saw both his mistakes and his future. He owned every misstep, but emphasized that talent without structure is a gamble no team should take. His leadership wasn't the throws he missed, but in the way he talked about what it means to be ready, to grow, and to lead when it matters most. It was a message every franchise should be listening to. This wasn't how it was supposed to start. Shedeur Sanders walked into that press conference looking like he had just survived a war zone. Not a football game. But after what had just unfolded, the stunned expression and heavy tone made complete sense. Thrown into the middle of a high-stakes NFL clash with zero warning and zero first-team reps, Sanders wasn't just making his debut. He was being shoved off a cliff and asked to fly. And the crazy part? He owned every second of it. Let's rewind to what actually happened. The Denver Broncos were facing the Baltimore Ravens, division rivals, high stakes, loud crowd, and playoff implications. At halftime, chaos hit. Starting quarterback Dillon Gabriel went down, and without blinking, the coaching staff pointed to Shedeur Sanders. No real warm-up. No established rhythm with the starters. No time to breathe. Now, if that sounds absurd, that's because it is. You're in the NFL. This isn't preseason. This isn't a test drive. This is a real game against one of the toughest defenses in the league, and your backup QB, who's never had a first-team rep, is now expected to just, go in the thing? And yet, Sanders didn't throw anyone under the bus. He could have called out the coaching decisions. He could have blamed the lack of preparation. He could have easily said, I wasn't set up for success. And honestly, he'd have been right. But no. Instead, he sat down, looked reporters in the eye, and admitted it straight. He didn't perform the way he wanted to. He took full accountability. There were no excuses, just a calm acknowledgement of what went wrong, and an even stronger focus on what comes next. It was a kind of maturity that some quarterbacks don't show in their third or fourth season, let alone on day one. Now, if you're wondering why a player with that much talent didn't get any first-team reps during the week, you're not alone. That was the question swirling around after the game. Because it wasn't just Shedeur who looked unprepared. The whole situation screamed of organizational breakdown. And to be clear, this wasn't just about throwing a rookie into the game. It was about throwing a rookie into the game cold. No reps, no rhythm. No chemistry with the starting receivers. You could see it in every mistimed throw, every broken play, every misconnection. It was like watching someone try to solve a puzzle in the dark. But through all of that, Sanders gave fans something real. Not stats, not a win, but honesty, character, and a level of leadership that doesn't show up on the scoreboard. He talked about how different things could have been if he'd had time to develop chemistry. He spoke with complete clarity about the timing issues, the lack of rhythm, and how crucial it is for a quarterback to know his receivers. Not just their names, but their pace, their habits, their instincts. And yet, he never complained. He didn't spin it. He didn't deflect. That's the part that hit hardest. You could tell this was someone who knows he has the tools to succeed. He wasn't lost. He wasn't defeated. He just wasn't prepared. And the difference between those two things? It's everything. Because let's be honest, when a player fails because of their own limitations, that's one thing. But when a player struggles because of an avoidable lack of preparation, that's on the organization. Period. It's no secret that NFL backup quarterbacks often get treated like placeholders until disaster strikes. But when that moment comes, and it always comes, the expectations skyrocket. You're supposed to perform like a starter without being treated like one. That's exactly what happened to Shedeur. He knew it. The fans knew it. Everyone watching knew it. And still, he showed gratitude. He thanked the coaches for trusting him. He praised his teammates. He expressed genuine appreciation for getting the opportunity, no matter how chaotic it was. And that right there, that's leadership. Not just in the polished way he spoke, but in how he framed the moment. Because it would have been easy to let that press conference spiral into bitterness. Instead, Sanders turned it into a statement of intent. He didn't shy away from his mistakes. He leaned into them. He talked about what he learned, what he wants to improve, how vital it is to get those first-team reps, not just to boost performance, but to be ready when the team needs him. He's not interested in being a side character. He wants the job. And if Dylan Gabriel remains unavailable next week, Shedeur's comments made it clear. He wants that start, and he'll be ready for it this time. But the fact that we're even in this situation raises questions that go way beyond one player. Why did the Broncos not have a more structured approach to preparing their backup quarterbacks? Why was a game this important left hanging on a player who hadn't even built chemistry with the starters? And maybe the biggest question, how often does this kind of thing happen across the league and no one says it out loud? Because Shedeur Sanders did say it. Without throwing shade, without starting drama, he exposed a quiet truth. This wasn't just about one bad debut. It was about systemic failure, a gap in planning, a lack of foresight. And yet somehow it became a defining moment for him. You don't get many quarterbacks who can stand in front of the media after being fed to the wolves and still speak with clarity, confidence, and calm. That's rare. That's something you build on. And you could feel the fan support building around him in real time. People saw the way he handled it. They heard the humility in his voice. They respected that he didn't hide behind excuses or finger-pointing. That kind of presence matters. Because in the NFL, talent is only part of the equation. Mental toughness? That's what separates guys who flame out from the ones who lead franchises. And Shedeur Sanders showed he has that part down. He's not just trying to prove he belongs. He's trying to prove that with the right prep, the right support, and the right plan, he can elevate the team around him. And that's not wishful thinking. That's what his entire post-game message was about. Yes, the debut was rough. Yes, he got thrown into chaos. But he didn't lose confidence. He saw exactly what went wrong, and now he wants to fix it. What stands out most is his vision for the future. Not in vague motivational speak, but in actual football terms. He wants to work with the starters. He wants those reps. He wants to be the guy who comes in prepared, not just available. It's a subtle but powerful distinction. Being available isn't the same as being ready. And Sanders wants to be ready every time. There's a reason analysts and fans are starting to buzz about him, not because of the numbers, but because of the mindset. He's already processing the game at a high level. He understands the importance of timing, of chemistry, of practice habits. He knows that developing into a franchise quarterback isn't about luck or natural talent. It's about structure, repetition, real reps, real stakes. That's what he's asking for, not shortcuts, not handouts. Just a fair shot with the right prep. And frankly, he's earned it. NFL history is full of stories where young quarterbacks got tossed into the fire too soon, burned out, and were never heard from again. But Shedeur Sanders isn't interested in being one of those names. He's already rewriting the narrative by refusing to play victim and choosing to grow through it. He's not looking back. He's looking at what needs to happen next. The fallout from this moment could go two ways. Either the organization takes accountability and adjusts their approach, or they continue the cycle of expecting miracles from unprepared backups. But if they do choose to invest in Sanders properly, if they give him the reps, the chemistry, the structure, then this shaky debut might end up being the launch pad, the ugly start before the breakout. So if you were expecting a broken rookie sulking at the mic, that's not what you got. You got a young quarterback with the composure of a vet, the clarity of a leader, and the hunger of someone who knows his time is coming. He's not done. He's just getting started. And something tells me we'll all want to be watching when he finally does get the reps he's asking for. Shedeur. If you're following the storyline as closely as we are, let us know what you think. Should the Broncos give Shedeur the start next week? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Like the video if you found this breakdown helpful, and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next chapter in this unfolding NFL drama. What makes this whole situation even more bizarre is how utterly predictable it was. And yet somehow, nobody in the building seemed prepared for it. The NFL is a league where next man up is practically a sacred phrase. Coaches preach it, players live by it, fans repeat it like gospel. But here's the ugly truth no one wants to admit. Most teams are not actually ready for their backup quarterback to step in. They say they are. But when that moment hits, panic, scramble, hope and prayer. That's what we saw with Shedeur Sanders. The Denver Broncos knew the stakes. This wasn't some throwaway Week 17 game with nothing on the line. This was Baltimore in a pressure cooker atmosphere, where every possession mattered. And yet, they threw Shedeur in cold, with no timing, no reps, and no real chance to succeed. And still, he gave them something to believe in. He showed poise under pressure that you cannot teach. He didn't crumble. He didn't lash out. He broke it down like someone who's been around the league for years, not hours. His comments weren't emotional outbursts. They were sharp, observant, and grounded in football IQ. And let's be clear, he wasn't just venting. He was diagnosing. Sanders made it crystal clear that quarterback performance doesn't happen in isolation. It's not just about talent. It's about chemistry. And chemistry doesn't just show up on game day because you hope it's there. It's built piece by piece, through practice, through reps, through repetition. And in his case, none of that happened. And here's the part that should set off alarm bells in the Broncos front office. If this is how you handle your backup quarterback, someone with clear upside, poise, and leadership traits, what message are you sending to the rest of the roster? Because every single player on that team saw what happened. They saw a guy get tossed into chaos, unprepared, and then take the fall for an organizational failure, and still take responsibility for it. That doesn't just affect the quarterback room. That ripples through the entire locker room. And you can bet players notice who stood tall when the pressure hit. You don't earn trust in the NFL with stats. You earn it with your response to failure. That's why, even in a game where nothing went right, Shedeur Sanders walked out of that tunnel with more respect than he had walking in, because the team saw the fire. They saw the hunger. They saw a guy who could have blamed everyone around him, and instead looked inward. That kind of accountability is rare, and it's contagious. So now the pressure is on not Shedeur, but the Broncos. Because they have to decide, was this just a one-off, or are they serious about developing this guy? Are they willing to give him real preparation? Or will he be kept on the sidelines until another emergency hits? They don't have much time to decide. With Gabriel potentially unavailable next week, Sanders may be the only real option. But this time, he's not asking for a miracle. He's asking for the bare minimum of professional preparation. Because as we've seen, talent only gets you so far if the structure around you is broken. Let's talk about structure for a second. The NFL is filled with stories of young quarterbacks who never got a fair shot because the team around them was a mess. Poor coaching. No line. No weapons. No plan. Fans love to label these guys busts. But the truth is much messier. More often than not, they were never put in a position to succeed. But Shedeur Sanders doesn't want to be one of those names. He knows how this league works. He's grown up in football, surrounded by it. And that knowledge is exactly why he's being so clear about what needs to change. He's not asking for sympathy. He's outlining a blueprint, one that starts with real reps, real chemistry, and real trust. Because quarterbacks don't evolve in isolation. They evolve with their team. He talked about that chemistry with the starting receivers, how important it is to understand how they come out of breaks, how they read coverages, how they adjust on the fly. That stuff you can only develop through reps. Film study helps. Chalk talk helps. But nothing replaces in-game rhythm. That rhythm wasn't there on Sunday. How could it be? But what's incredible is that, despite all that, there were flashes, moments where you saw the footwork, the arm strength, the vision. It was buried under the chaos, yes, but it was there. And that's why this press conference wasn't just post-game routine. It was a warning shot. Shedeur Sanders is telling the league, I'm not going anywhere. Shedeur. He's already doing the one thing every franchise quarterback has to do: lead when things are ugly, led when everyone else wants to retreat. He's showing that leadership isn't about sounding confident when you're winning. It's about holding steady when everything's falling apart. And if you're a Broncos fan watching this, the message should be loud and clear. The team has a potential asset at quarterback, not just a backup, not just a body in the QB room. A potential leader for the future, but only if they handle this right. Because players like this don't grow in the dark. They need reps, they need structure, and more than anything, they need a team that believes in development, not just damage control. Shedeur Sanders is built for this, not because he was perfect, but because he wasn't and still owned it. This is a kind of debut that becomes a footnote if the story turns out great. People forget the stat line and remember the growth, the maturity, the resilience. But that only happens if the next chapter is different, if next time he is prepared, if next time he does have chemistry, if next time he steps in not as a desperation option, but as someone the team prepared for the moment. And that's why this moment matters. Because now the eyes are on Denver, not Shedeur. He's done his part. He faced the fire, stood in it, and didn't blink. Now it's on the team to show they understand what they've got and what they nearly squandered. And if they get it right, then we'll look back on this as a spark. Because sometimes the most important moments don't happen in victory. They happen in defeat, when you find out what someone is really made of. And if Sunday showed us anything, it's that Shedeur Sanders is made of more than just arm talent and highlight reels. He's got leadership in his DNA and resilience in his bones. Let's see what he does with a real shot. Let's see what the Broncos do with a second chance to get it right. There's something kind of haunting about watching a player do everything right in the worst possible scenario and still walk away with an L hung around their neck. Because that's exactly what happened with Shedeur Sanders. The numbers? Forget the numbers. They're not the story here. The real story is how a rookie quarterback, stripped of every advantage, dropped into chaos, and set up with no meaningful prep, still came out looking like the most mature adult in the room. And now, somehow, he's the one carrying the burden of fixing it. Let's talk about that post-game press conference again. Because if you really listen to it, not just the words, but the tone, you hear a guy try not to explode. You hear the frustration between the lines. You hear someone biting his tongue just enough to keep it professional, but still make his point. And it landed. Shedeur didn't need to go scorched earth on the Broncos. He didn't have to call out the coaches by name or demand changes. All he had to do was tell the truth. And the truth was damning enough. No first-team reps. No rhythm with the receivers. No meaningful prep in the days leading up to the game. And yet, the expectation was for him to lead the team back against a top-tier defense in a divisional game. That's not just unrealistic. That's reckless. That's how you ruin quarterbacks. That's how careers get cut short before they even start. And the fact that Sanders knows that, the fact that he was able to speak about it with such clarity, without self-pity or anger, that tells you everything about his mental makeup. He knows how quickly narratives get built in this league. One bad game? That's all it takes. One shaky debut, and suddenly the talking heads are calling you a bust. The fans start losing patience. The team starts second-guessing. That window to prove yourself, it's slammed shut fast if you don't control your own story. But here's what makes Shedeur's approach so smart. He didn't try to spin the loss into a fake win. He didn't pretend he played well. He owned the performance. He acknowledged the mistakes, talked about where he fell short, and then immediately shifted into how he wants to get better. Not vague, generic platitudes either. Real football talk, timing issues, receiver depth, play tempo, chemistry. The kind of things only someone who's actually processing the game would focus on, not just someone who wants to sound polished in front of the media. And that's what makes this situation so ridiculous. Because when you have a young quarterback who wants to put in the work, who knows what's missing, and who's willing to take accountability for things outside his control, that's someone you should be building around. Immediately, instead, he got tossed into the middle of a mess the team created, then expected to clean it up with a smile. And still, he almost pulled it off. Shedeur, not on the scoreboard, maybe, But in the bigger picture, Shedeur Sanders left that game with his reputation stronger, not weaker. That doesn't happen often after a loss like this. But it happened here because of how he carried himself. You can't teach that kind of resilience. That's built. That's earned. And it's why fans are already rallying behind him. Because they saw something the box score doesn't show. They saw a guy who gets it. A guy who's not here to play the blame game. He's here to build something. And he's not asking for a handout. He's asking for structure. A real plan. Real reps. A chance to actually prepare instead of being an emergency option. And the Broncos have to answer that now. No more excuses. No more throwing a guy in the deep end and hoping he floats. Either invest in his development or admit you're not serious about building a future. Because here's the thing. Quarterbacks with the kind of emotional control and self-awareness Shedeur showed, they don't come around often. He didn't let the moment overwhelm him. He used it, he processed it, and he walked away better for it. That's leadership. Not just in the locker room, but on the sideline, in the media, in the way he handles adversity. And if he's given even half the preparation that most starters get, we're talking about a totally different game. So now the spotlight's back on Denver. Do they recognize what they have in front of them? Or do they let another young talent get lost in the shuffle? That press conference wasn't just Shedeur Sanders answering questions. It was him putting the league on notice. Shedeur, he knows what he needs. He knows what went wrong. And most importantly, he's not going to let that be the end of the story. There's something kind of poetic about that. Because in a league that loves to write players off after one mistake, Shedeur just flipped the script with a loss. And now, we wait. If you're rooting for quarterbacks who actually care about the process, who understand the game, and who take accountability even when they shouldn't have to, make sure to like this video, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more breakdowns of the chaos behind the headlines. Because if this is the start of the Shedeur Sanders era, you're going to want to say you were here from day one.